property situated in the city of Findlay via ordinance number 2022-074. Is anybody here that would like to speak for this issue? Is anybody here that would like to speak against this issue? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the public hearing. Mr. Palmer, second Mr. Slough. All in favor of adjournment, say aye. Any opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Good evening and welcome to the regular session of Findlay City Council on August 16th, 2022. We will start this evening's meeting with the roll call, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Mr. Bowman?
Here.
Ms. Frischi. Mr. Greeno.
Here.
Mr. Hellman.
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Here, we have no electronics, I don't think.
You're on. Right here.
Check. All right.
Right there's the gentleman.
All right.
It's fine on there, just not in here.
Are we going?
Yeah, let's finish
There is
this.
sound on the feed, so we can keep going and
Okay.
everybody in here is listening.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Russell. Mr. Slough.
Here.
Ms. Warnicki. Here. Mr. Wopser.
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will accept a motion to accept the previous public hearing minutes and the city council minutes. Mr. Slough.
I would move to approve the minutes as circulated for both the city council and also for the public hearing minutes.
Yeah, I don't think there were public hearing minutes, but August 2nd. Thank you. Do I hear a second? Mr. Palmer, all those in favor, or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are accepted. We do not have any add-ons, replacements, or removals from tonight's agenda. We have no proclamations, no recognition or retirement resolutions. We do have one petition.
The status of the Mardic Investments Incorporated annexation for parcel number 020001025344, which is south of County Road 99. A letter from the agent for the petitioner to let us know what they want it to be zoned as, which is M2 multifamily high density.
Questions or comments? Petition will be referred to the Planning Commission and the Planning and Zoning Committee. Written communications.
Save the date for an engineering study of the Riverside Dam Reservoir area from the Blanchard River Watershed Partnership Group. And she will also be providing an oral communication.
Questions or comments? We'll have her during oral communications step forward. Okay.
A letter from property owner of 736th Street in opposition of the alley vacation request between 1415 and 1419 South Blanchard Street.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from Christopher and Kathy Stremka. Thank you. Property owners of 205 East Lima Street regarding carriage walks.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Oral communications, we're going to start with Lauren Sandhu, I'm sorry, from the Blanchard River Watershed Partnership. She'd like to give council an update.
All right. Well, thank you for having me this evening so I can provide an overall update on the actions of the Blanchard River Watershed Partnership since we were last here at City Council in October of 2020. We have been actively working on the ecologic restoration of the Riverside Dam and Reservoir. This is a project that's been discussed in depth since 2016. So in January of 2022, we received funds through the American Rescue Plan Action Fund in the amount of $80,000, and this was allocated to an engineering study that was going to be conducted of the Riverside Dam and Reservoir to evaluate dam modification and sediment removal, as sediment has accumulated behind the dam for several decades. So with those funds, we were able to hire Verdantis. Verdantis is formerly known as Hull & Associates out of Toledo. They're an engineering firm, and we commissioned them to begin this engineering study in January of 2022. The engineering study officially began in March of 2022 with a cultural resources literature review of the project area, and this is in compliance with the Section 106 National Historic Preservation Act. Because the dam is a historic site, there had to be an archaeological evaluation. Nothing of concern was found during that review. Following that, in May of 2022, we received a draft field sampling and analysis plan for the Riverside Park Dam, and this plan outlined the sample collection procedures that would be used by Verdantis and their subcontractors to sample sediment for surface water sampling, and then the sampling locations were spatially distributed throughout the dam and reservoir area. So there were up to 11 sites that were sampled for sediment in the project area, and there were 2 sites that underwent surface water sampling. So in May of 2022, the Hancock County Commissioners also approved the allocation of an additional $80,000 from the Hancock County Flood Mitigation Funds. These funds will be contributed to the pre-construction phase of the project, which is the phase after the engineering study. And this phase will consist of finalizing designs, models, plan specifications will be established, a revegetation plan will be established, all necessary permitting will be obtained, final construction costs will be established, and there will also be public outreach conducted. So we have received these funds from the county commissioners, and we are just holding on to them until that next phase of the project begins. So in early June of 2022, sediment sampling and bathymetric surveys were conducted at Riverside Park, and we submitted pictures of that to both the Courier and posted that on our Facebook page as well as our website. Later that month, throughout this whole process, we've been actively searching for funding opportunities to fund the rest of the project. So $80,000 from the commissioners will cover most of the pre-construction phase. There's still a small portion that would be left to cover, and then obviously the actual construction itself. So we were searching for funding opportunities. Verdantis alerted us of a funding opportunity in June. Through the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, or NOAA. They had a funding opportunity titled the Restoring Fish Passage Through Barrier Removal, and up to $65 million is available through that funding source, and it specifically addresses dam modification, fish passage installation, barrier removal, and sediment removal. So they're accepting projects that ask for a minimum of $1 million up to $5 million with a target time span of over 3 years. So after we reviewed the notice of federal funding, we arranged for a meeting on June 28th between the project scientists at Verdantis and our local NOAA representatives to discuss if the Riverside project was eligible to receive this funding. It was determined that an application should be submitted and that we would need to place emphasis on the fish species of the Blanchard River as well as the overall recreational value of the river as well, which those were both of our focuses to begin with. So we began working on the application, and on August 3rd, we had a meeting with project scientists from Verdantis as well as Alden, which is one of their subcontractors, and they specialize specifically in fish passage design. And they presented us with 5 different potential fish passage design conceptual drawings, and we had a discussion to determine 3 drawings that would be best that we could include in the NOAA funding application. So we received letters of support for this project and for this application from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. That letter was arranged by Director Mary Mertz, and the Fish Management Research Chief and Assistant Chief wrote that letter for us. We also secured a letter of support from Senator Sherrod Brown, Senator Rob McCauley, Representative John Cross, Mayor Murin, the Hancock Park District, the Findlay Hancock Community Foundation, and Dick Kozlowski. He's one of our board members, and he's lived near Riverside Park for about 18 years. And it was recommended in the NOAA funding opportunity that we include a letter of support from a landowner. So our application package was prepared by myself, Verdantis, and assistance from Jennifer Williams, Nonprofit Consulting. And we successfully submitted that application package yesterday, so Monday, August 15th. We received confirmation that that application has been received by NOAA, and we requested the amount of $3,122,300. And this amount was determined by the team at Verdantis. So those are the most accurate estimates that we have to date. So these funds will cover the remainder of the cost of the pre-construction phase, which would begin in the fall or early winter, as well as the construction and post-construction phases. The earliest start date that NOAA will allow is December 1st of 2022. So we're anticipating that grant award announcement would come sometime in October of 2022. If funding is not received through this opportunity, we've done all of the groundwork to put this application together, and so we'll be able to take that information and apply it to other sources if needed. So in regard to the project, the Blanchard River Watershed Partnership will be holding a public update event on Friday, September 23rd from 10 a.m. till noon at the Waterfall Pavilion at Riverside Park. And during this outreach event, it will be open to stakeholders and members of the public. We've already sent out save the dates and we'll be submitting out invitations in the next couple weeks. But during this outreach event, we will discuss the results of Verdantis's engineering study, next steps, and hopefully maybe we'll have an announcement that funding has been received at that point. So we're gonna keep our fingers and toes crossed on that one. So that is where we are at currently. The engineering study has stayed on schedule. That should be wrapping up later this month, early next month, and there will be a meeting that will be held between the City of Findlay, Verdantis, and the Blanchard River Watershed Partnership to discuss the results of the engineering study before they're presented to the public on September 23rd. Any questions?
Any questions for Lauren? That's a lot of information, Lauren. It sounds like there's some great opportunities if awarded. So any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Second, we'd like Kareem Baroudi, our health commissioner, to come up, make some comments about the health district department agreement and any other questions you might have for him.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all for having me tonight. And just want to tell you that what prompted this kind of sudden visit, me watching last council meeting, because I always like to kind of see the feedback you all getting from your constituents, and I want to make sure that you guys have all the information for a lot of the questions that you get, from your representation there. So. I think the mayor and Mr. Martin did a great job in, answering a lot of the questions. There was a lot of details that pertains to the budget and, how the DAC is made up and how the merger came about 6 years ago. So I will be more than glad to entertain a lot of those questions today. The reason I don't come in here and interact with all of you a lot. I do interact individually. I get a lot of calls from all of you. I get a lot of, good feedback, the things that we can improve on, and those were valued, especially during the COVID time. We're improving every day. I'm here 6 years after the combination of the Hancock County Health Department and the City of Findlay Health Department to tell you that, again, I think I was here at year mark 1 and 2 and 3, and I always started by saying that was the best decision that council made back then. We have a stronger, better health department right now. We have a health department that's got the national recognition of high standards of providing public health services to your citizens, to your constituents. We added bunch of services. We expanded. We're in a new place. We're in a new environment. I think we're the envy of the region and the state, to be honest with you, at this point. There's always room for improvement, and that's I'm here, and that's why we're getting a lot of your good ideas incorporated in our vision and mission. I'm going to take any comments you might have today or during the course of you calling individually to the board all the time. I do interact a lot with the administration, and I have a lot of their support. They have a lot of my support on again, serving well. I think that's the bottom line for me and for them and for all of you. So a few documents that the mayor was kind enough to share with a lot of you. I don't know if it was shared electronically or was printed for you. But some, I did put like a 2-page summary for the consideration of how we came up with the 5742 kind of apportionment. I know we had some questions about that, but that based on population, and it's explained in there how not myself, but a lot of you who are in this room who worked on the merger came up with when they were negotiating with the county on that part. Again, bottom line, I think the merger 6 years later, a little over 6 years later, achieved each and every goal that you guys set for the health district to be. We achieved, again, accreditation. We merged well. I think that went seamless. We increased services. And at the same time, we decreased expense to the taxpayers of Findlay and Hancock County. I did include, the financial report from the health district, the Findlay Health Department, back in 2014, where the cost to public health from the city's general revenue, which we consider, taxpayers' revenues, was $379,011.16. Now, 7 years later, that's the city taxpayers will still be less liable to again a larger health department, 50+ services that we're providing, and a great value to people who come in Findlay to work and play and spend some dollars as well. I want to give you a quick comparison. We always kind of benchmark ourselves with counties our size, our makeup, kind of have the same services. Huron County is one of them, Sandusky County is one of them, and Erie County is one of them. I always, when I go back and report to the board, I'm going to give them that comparison because they have a fiduciary responsibility to watch what we're doing in our budget and how we're spending money and how we're getting money as well. We spent per capita in 2021, we spent per capita from taxpayers' dollars, $7.96. That's almost 15.25% of the $52.17 we spent in general. So our overall budget was a little less than, $4 million last year in 2021. And we are spending $52.17 in general. With coming out of taxpayers' money, it's $7.96. Huron County, taxpayers' portion is $16.08. Sandusky County, taxpayers' portion is $11.45. Erie County, taxpayers' portion of the overall health district budget is $30.92. So you can tell, I think we fiscally, we are achieving what this city council and the rest of the county trustees and village mayors wanted this district to do, just to keep the cost to our tax base really low, provide premier services, get a credit because it was a requirement of the state, and do all the good things that you will find detailed, some of them highlighted and detailed in your in the annual report that Cheryl helped me distribute to all of you. So that's for the budget. As far as the actual contract. The actual contract back then, it was a combination contract. It was done to kind of work out the logistics and how the two departments are going to come together. There's a lot of liquidation of assets back then, and all the calculations were made. And some of you who were involved back then kind of came up to the agreement that's how it's going to be. It's going to be county independent board that will represent the interest of health services in Findlay and Hancock County. So there was a 5-year agreement. We couldn't go back and kind of bring this agreement, bring the same group or kind of the group that's existing right now to work on a continuation agreement because there was a limit on allocating money in that agreement. So we needed allocation of money moving forward. We did file for the extension, and back then, Mr. Martin and the mayor came to you and said, we're going to extend it by 1 year until we come out of COVID, and we'll be able to kind of get together and do more with that contract. And kind of, we were waiting for the 2020 census as well to come out because, again, the base was a population based on how the allocations are going to go. Our DAC made up of 29 members, 19 township trustees, 7 or 8 village mayors, the mayor, Mayor Mern, and the chair of the county commissioner. Those are voting members, 29 members, and everything we do present to them once a year in March, where we present to them the budget for next year. And that's where they'll approve our budget, and they will approve, we'll present to them the highlight of what we've done, the activities, the programs, and we field any questions at that time too. This body and the city of Findlay was represented by the mayor and her administration at that meeting, and they provided valuable feedback too from this body. So, in all, I think the state of our combination is going well. We just wanted to some longevity to that contract. It will be not in the best interest of the health district, not the best interest of the people we serve, to kind of go year to year or 5 years at a time or whatever. We want some longevity. I think that combination contract was to test and see, okay, how this combination is going to go. Is it going to work for your constituents or not? Is it going to work for the county or not? Then we'll come back in 5 years and say, okay, you know what? This marriage is made in heaven and we want to keep going. I think that was the whole idea. I think, and I heard some comments, in your last meeting a little bit about, limiting the terms of the contract and, when it comes to kind of duration of the contract. I think 5 years at a time will be good for us as a health district, for the Board of Health to plan better. It will be better for our funders, which may make up almost 70% of our budget, to say, okay, you know what, this is an agency that's going to last, and we can make long commitments in there and bring in more money, whether it's federal or state or local money as well from the different organization. So I think the long-term commitment by you as a city of Findlay, the biggest stakeholder in this marriage, to say we're behind the health department and we're behind it for a long time. We'll come back every 3 years, like Mr. Martin explained last time. We'll come back every 3 years and look at, okay, do you need that contribution? How we're doing, on budget-wise? Do we need to lower that, increase that, react? I think that should be given, and we should be doing a lot more of that. But as far as commitment to be in one health department moving forward, I think that should be long-term because of it's in the best interest of the people we serve. That's it. Now, I heard some of the questions about why we're asking for 5%, what justifies that. As I explained to some of you who did ask the questions and reached out, how are we doing with the budget? The budget is almost doubling. We're growing fast, which is a good thing for the constituents that we're providing more services. We're providing more outreach. It's just those last 2 years are not a good indicator because we did get a lot of infusion from the COVID money. So if you look at the budget from last year and you see $2 million out of the $4 million operating budget was grants, probably a good $1 million of those came from the federal and the state government to combat COVID. So this money is going to dry up here next year and the years to come, so we want some sustainable. We looked at the budget and we said, okay, we've been flat for the last 6 years, and we've been even below zero for the city contributions and the county before the merger. I think 5% is reasonable to account for some of that cost of living, increasing exponentially. We want to pay our people a little better. We want to be competitive. You all heard about incentives and everything else, and we're a government nonprofit. We cannot provide a lot of those incentives that private industries is providing, but we want to make sure we retain the best to serve the best. In that commitment, the board want to look at the pay scale, want to revise the pay scale, want to bring it up to speed to be competitive enough to not only retain people but recruit people as well. That's part of it. I think it's it would be reasonable to kind of come back in 3 years once again that variation from the COVID money will be kind of level off a little bit. Come back and say, okay, that's how we're operating in peacetime, and that's how the health department is going to move forward. The promise of thriving to be fee for service and grant funded health department, I think that's going to keep on going. And like Mr. Martin explained last meeting, we'll come back in 3 years and we'll sit down with the township trustees. We'll sit down with the mayor and her administration, and we'll look at the budget and say, okay, you know what? We did ask for 5%. I think we're going to stay flat, or need be, we can do a reduction too. The most important thing is to, for all of us, and especially this body and the township trustees, not to waver on providing good health services for our constituents. I think this is important moving forward. We've seen what happened in COVID. Now the monkeypox is kind of back in the news again. There's a lot of uncertainty. We're working on what came out of the health assessment that's been accomplished as well. There's a lot of priorities, whether it's mental health, whether it's addiction, whether it's chronic disease. We're working on a lot of initiatives, and I think it's important for us to stay on target here. One other topic of interest to you will be the mobile health clinic, and that's going very well, especially that after we took possession last spring of 2021, most of the rollout was to give vaccine out and kind of get some visibility and introduction to the citizens. A couple months ago, we did hire a nurse practitioner to be full-time permanent provider on that bus, she did include some of the numbers of her numbers in that report I distributed to all of you. Things are going very well. We've done a lot of meetings with, she's doing a lot of networking. She's seeing people who otherwise we don't see in the regular healthcare settings. They're not presenting themselves, not to us, not to the hospital, but they are a burden on the overall health status of our community. We want to make sure we get everybody in the door. We want to make sure everybody has access to all the services we provide. A lot of it is brick and mortar, whether it's mental health or healthcare. So it's important for us to kind of provide that access point to the people who are not coming into our doors, to make sure we bring up the whole community all together. So that's for the mobile clinic. Again, there's a lot of information in there. But I'm going to give some time here to kind of entertain any questions you guys might have.
Mr. Wobser.
Kareem, thank you first to you and your staff for all the great service you provide to our community. The questions that I have kind of do circle around the contract.
Sure.
Because it's significantly different this time around, at least from my reading, than the first contract that we signed. First, this current contract discusses the combined general health district board quite often. Who makes up the combined health district board?
Okay, before the combination, there was the General Health District of Hancock County, and there was the City of Findlay Health District. At the combination, by statute, it will be combined health district of the City of Findlay, was the county seat, and the townships and villages that make up Hancock County. So the combined health district board is the governing entity for the Board of Health as a combined entity. If you had the chance to look at the previous contract or the contract that set up the logistics of that, the City of Findlay is represented with 3 representatives on the board. So there are 3 board members that the mayor will nominate and bring him to this body to suggest to the board. And there are 3 that are county representative from the different villages and the townships. And there's 1 member that's representing the businesses or the individuals we license in the county and the city.
Okay.
We call them the licensing council.
Okay, so in my reading of this, that board and not the DAC, there's a difference between those two, right? That board is the sole decider then of what the increase and or potential decrease or any rebates that would come back potentially if the budget wasn't completely used, correct?
Correct. And the reason this was put this way or that language, because on a monthly basis, as a governing body, we'll go to the board and show them our balance sheet and what we brought in and what we expended and how. So the board is closer to our budget, closer oversight to our budget. So they will be able at the end of the year say, okay, you know what, as we present our budget for next year to them, to say, okay, we have a deficit here or we have a big surplus that's going to exceed the carryover that we decided we're going to do because we have to cover our expenses to start the year. So they will go to the DAC. All the budget issues are resolved at the DAC. The board is an oversight. So the board will suggest to the DAC that will be a reduction or an increase accordingly, depending on what they see in that budget.
Very good. Then to finish up questions about the money, you sounded pretty certain that the 5% is going to come through. Obviously, you don't know exactly how much money you're going to spend this year, how quickly the ARPA funds and other grant funds that you've got will diminish, because that's what's been running the show for the last couple of years, which is wonderful, right? I guess that's a taxpayer money coming from someplace else. But you're fairly certain then that the 5% is something that we should use for our budget terms.
Yes, and again, I want to say that it's for planning purposes, and we don't know what's going to happen to that, all that money that was connected to COVID back in the last couple of years and this year too. We want to make sure we continue the operations the way we should be. Now that 5%, again, everything increased in prices. We acquired a building. The building was, in looking into the building, a lot of you helped, as council members. I had Mr. Stasiak helping me a lot too with as we were acquiring the building. Our service is now in a building that's, that's safe, that's clean. We were operating out of the county cottages, we call them cottages, but there was a leak in the clinic. And I think back then I came in here and explained to you why we need the building. That endeavor was done by the board on their own, saying, okay, we're not going to go to the city council, we're not going to go to the county commissioners, we're not going to go to the township and ask for money to have a good building for our services, but we're going to take that on our own and incorporate that in our operating budget. So the cost of everything is going up, and anticipating that 5%, if you break it down in the last 7-8 years, that's going to take us into 2025, that will be very minimal as an increase.
I still have.
Just a second. Mr. Hellman, you had a question? I don't want you to.
No.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, fine.
Here. Thank you.
Do you have another question then?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Go ahead.
So my last question then goes around the term, and you've said this is a long-term contract. And in my reading of this is a never-ending, evergreen contract. Is that your reading of this contract also?
Yes, and I think that's how it should be. It's never ending in a way where there's a clause in there, and that was at the request of the mayor and her administration to put a clause in there. If one of the entity, whether the city, city decided they don't want to be part of that combination, or the township trustees, they will have to give the combined entity enough time to dissolve. Some of you, know how hard it was to dissolve the two health department and make them into one. We had trucks that they had to kind of appraise. We lost a lot of money on appraisals and dissolve, all that stuff. Now there's more to it because as we are growing, again, there's a building now. We have a mortgage. How are we going to split that? We have accreditation. I mean, the National Accreditation Board said the combined general health district is doing is working up to standards. How would they go if the city will decide to go on their own and the counties will decide not to go on their own? In my personal opinion and my estimation, professional estimation, that will be a big burden not only on the city and the county, it will be a big burden on the people we serve.
Understood. So we've got a 3-year out clause on this. So at any point in time after we approve it, obviously, we got to wait until we approve it the first time. We have to give you 3 years notice before we could terminate contract.
That's correct.
Not saying that we would, but as we look at this, I guess one of the things I'm interested in is we looked at the percentages after the first contract, which was the first 5 years. And in the new contract, there's no stipulations to go back in and do that again at some point in time because it's an evergreen contract. It continues on ad infinitum. So I'm trying to determine, is that the best thing for us? Or for the board for that matter, what if we have a large influx of people into the city versus the county or vice versa for whatever reason, and those percentages change dramatically? What would be our avenue for adjustment?
Sure. I think since the contract is based on population alone at this point, I think there's a clause, I hope it's in there, that talks about going every 10 years what the census data will come out and adjust for influx or outflux of people from certain area of the county.
Sure.
So there will be that going back every 10 years and say, okay, you know what, the city lost 600 individuals, they went out in the county lost 193, they went out to Wood County or whatever. So we will come back and say, okay, that's how it should be. For this particular agreement, I think the change was very minimal, and it did not warrant reopening that clause of changing the appropriation.
Okay.
We have one thing, if you allow me, Councilman.
Sure.
It's good to think of public health more than just the city of Findlay limits. We got a lot of people that come in from the county that work in here, that eat in here, that go to all the attractions we have in here. So it's, and we learned from COVID that, a lot of those threats, a lot of that preparedness needs to be just beyond the city limits because there's an influx of people that come in here every day, they go back home, they bring in more stuff next, they do eat here, there's more burden on the restaurant inspections, all the other stuff, the businesses. So it's good to think regionally more than just the city Findlay limit.
Understood. Absolutely. I have to be the watcher for the city tax dollars, so that's what concerns me most. So I guess the question then, it may be more for the for our law department is, do we have any other evergreen contracts that we're currently involved in?
I'm here in Don's place tonight.
Thank you.
Rob Feitner, for those of you that don't know me, I've been an assistant city law director prosecuting on the second floor for 23 years now. I represent the village of Macomb and Benton Ridge and Van Buren mostly. I'm here tonight in Don's stead. Certainly I'm not aware of every contract that we have pending right now, but I can certainly ask Don that if that's a concern about other contracts that might be out there that are like that just reoccur.
And it's not, I guess it's not a concern if we haven't, but we've just never dealt with, to my knowledge, an evergreen contract that is going on forever. I mean, normally we have an end date, we know how much it's going to cost us, we budget accordingly, and so I guess I'm wondering if there's some way that if the way we're treating this is appropriate.
Well, I think like there was section 4, paragraph 5 addressed the every 10-year census. I mean, if
Yes.
something like that came to fruition, I guess, a contract addendum would be what the city would be looking for. And I would be calling for a meeting with everybody involved to talk about the city's concerns and see if that could be resolved. And if it could be, you would add that as an addendum just like this was. And I don't know all the changes.
If there were a
this
change,
did.
if there were a change after
In
the
March.
first decade.
Right, this was March of 22 or whatever it was, but I don't know what the changes were. Sounds like they were minimal, but you could certainly do that again. Certainly, yes, it would be odd. This is how many contracts do we have that don't have an end date? I think this one must have been based on the facts at that time, but
Understood. Thank you, Rob.
If I may add some additional information, a really good example is actually the EMS services. So it's a 5-year contract with auto renewals. So when, obviously, we don't do many mergers of departments in services that are essential to city government. We typically operate those on our own. I don't think any of us are interested in doing that at this point in time with public health. So we do have other agreements that are in similar structures. As Kareem mentioned, in section 4, page 3, item number 5, the apportionment is based off of the census, so it is evaluated. Additionally, the language of the contract states that the increase shall be no more than 5%. They would still need to present that to us, and if we had concerns, we would be going to the board of the health department to say what's going on, and no, we have issue. Additionally, as we mentioned at the last meeting, we did add in the item related to if there are cost decreases or they receive additional support through grants, et cetera, to cover their costs, that the amounts would be decreased proportionately. So I do think that overall the contract is very, very similar to the prior one. Obviously, there was a lot more language in the original document because it was setting up the organization itself. And now this agreement is maintaining the operations of the agreement or of the organization.
And Kareem, don't think for any reason I have some weird desire to get rid of this. Not at all. I'm just trying to understand what it is that we're agreeing to.
I appreciate, and sometimes we get caught up in, the lingo that we deal with the DAC and everybody else, but you guys are making it clear to your constituent. I appreciate that, actually.
Hey, just real quick, I assume you're available to answer any
Absolutely.
from Mr. Wobser's questions privately,
Absolutely.
if you'd like,
Yes.
if he would contact you.
Yes.
Any other questions from
Mr.
any other
Harrington?
members? Ms. Frischie?
Are you done
All right.
for the moment? So I had the similar questions that Jeff had on the contract. And hearing the mayor talk about the EMS contract, I don't think that EMS contract, though, has a 3-year prior clause before you can get out. I think that's my biggest concern, is that even if you wanted out, you have to wait 3 years. And depending where we are in the city with finances at that time, how does that look? And what other options, I guess I would be asking legal counsel for us. Can we eliminate that? And how would that look if we had a 5-year contract with the 3 years and then the additional 2 is one question. My other question, Karim, is we talk about the percentage breakdown for the city and the county, and you brought up the mobile clinic, but how do you factor that into our contribution when city council and the administration back in May gave that additional 100,000? I think, are we going to be continually asking for additional money on top of this contract? Are we going to be having the mayor come forward and say, hey, we got this great idea, and that was a controversial topic in the community. So I feel like we have that 57% or whatever it is for the city. But on top of that, last year we did another 100,000, and that's not pennies to me. So how do you plan to ask us for, are you planning on asking us for additional money as the administration for other little projects that you're seeing, since you had those COVID dollars, right? We had that additional $1 million. And you're not going to be having that down the road. And you also mentioned that $7.92 per person. What year was that for? Was that during the COVID money that you had that calculation, or prior?
It's 2021, but I do have them from 2017. In 2017, taxpayers paid $8.04 per capita. In 2018, they paid $8.01. In 2019, they paid $8.11. In 2020, they paid $8.25. And that
So
was-
there's not a really big flux with that additional $1 million that you got to be looking at that potential 5% increase down the road. It doesn't sound like it factored into your daily operations. Yes?
Yeah, no, I think, if I understand your question well, this is the contribution of the taxpayers, city and county, towards the overall budget. So paying $7.96, if we factor out all the money we spent in 2021, $52 per person. But that was most of it. It's only 15% of it was taxpayer funded. Most of it was grants. You're correct. So compared to let's say go back to 2018 and 17, we were spending $36. Now with the grants, we're spending $52. So we spent $20 per person extra, and the taxpayer burden was lower.
So our contribution is what is setting off the individual taxpayer amount being
That's correct.
lower than the other counties that we're praising.
Not the grants. We're praising the good fiscal, responsible.
Well,
board
our
that-
portion, the county's portion, our contribution as a whole is higher, which is what is decreasing the individual taxpayer's cost. So when you compared it to Sandusky County, and you mentioned three
Erie
counties.
County, Huron County.
Yeah,
Sonora,
they were quite a bit higher. So they must. So the city and county over there,
They gave more.
they're not given as much. So the individual taxpayer is paying more.
No, they gave more. If I want to set the contribution of the city and the county taxpayers, I will get the contribution I'm getting from both entity and divided by how many people we're serving. And that will come up to $7.96. If you guys are contributing more, it will be more of the taxpayers' money. Going back to the 2014 financial report of the City of Findlay Health Department, it does break it down here, and it will say 2014 cost for the taxpayers, it was 18 cents per capita. And that's 8 years ago.
Okay. So my questions on the 100,000, I'll circle back to that because I think Christina maybe wanted to cover it before you. I don't know.
Yeah, Councilwoman Frishy, good question. So, the mobile health clinic was a one-off project that had been discussed for a while and seen as a valuable tool for the health department. If there is something outside of the normal operations, there's always the opportunity to come back to council and have a conversation of whether we believe it is valuable. But one of the things that we made very clear when we were having that discussion with the health department is that we shouldn't see a huge increase in the operations. I would say 5%, given that that's lower than inflation at this point in time, and really what organizations across the community are seeing is very reasonable, especially given that they really haven't had significant increases over the last 6 years. The reason I specifically requested the out clause was one, because I used to do a lot of contracts and I always like to have outs, but I specifically requested it be 3 years because it takes a significant amount of work to stand up a government mandated department. And there would be a lot of work that would have to go with facilities, team development. You know, there's a whole lot that goes in this. So it was really not because, hey, I want to be able to pull the plug at any moment. We could today say, okay, yeah, we signed it, but we're giving you 3 years notice and completely reevaluate. Yes, we could do that. But I think it's really from an operational standpoint that we would need that amount of time to establish an effective department. And I think, the numbers really speak for themselves when we look at the cost that the city of Findlay government was bearing to operate an independent health department, and the efficiencies that we're gaining and the overall level of service that has been gained through the combination, I think is well worth the citizens' support. And as Kareem, I just want to reiterate, when we're looking at the investment that is being made by city government or county government through taxpayer dollars, again, that's from the direct contributions to support those efforts. And so not only does our team really have much lower overall contributions, very consistent as I'm looking at that, we are well below the taxpayer contribution. So I applaud Kareem and his team for going out and getting that accreditation. I know it's something that just seems like, oh, okay, we're accredited, kudos to you, but helps a lot with additional funding and support and the reimbursements from those government entities to help cover the cost and hopefully continue to decrease it.
So, Krim, I am not against having a health department at all. You know that during COVID these last couple of years, there's been a lot of concern in the community through parents in the schools. There's been a lot of disheartened feelings, and feelings aren't money, but they are something that we have to make sure we are addressing those to do better. And I appreciate that you're working on having better transparency with your meetings monthly. I think that's something that the public will look forward to, especially when there's hotter topics going on, hopefully not COVID ever again. And I don't want to hear about monkeypox. But I think financially, I have a little bit of problem with the contract, and I would like to know from our legal counsel on that 3-year you're out. I mean, what would happen if one of our townships no longer existed or didn't have the money to pay for it? They're not going to wait 3 years and say, oh, we'll keep scrounging up the money and pay you. When we looked at combining these health departments 5-6 years ago, being accredited, the goal was to make us more of a regional, right? Because they were trying to eliminate the smaller health departments. So are you seeing anything happening there to offset our costs by expanding, which is what the original plan goals were?
Sure. And a couple of our programs are state renowned by now, and I did mention that. Our Help Me Grow in particular, now we're expanding into Fostoria, where we don't have jurisdiction, since Fostoria isn't like a 3-county thing, but we're expanding our services there. Hardin County is going to need some service here coming up. Wyandotte County is not doing well because they did not have the vision you all had 6 years ago to combine the resources and make it a more efficient, better health department. So not to criticize any other community here, but we do see openings a lot, especially with us being up to national standards and how we do services in that respect. I want to go back to the mobile clinic. I think the mobile clinic, the mayor answered that perfectly by saying this is one-time shot. And she did make that clear in front of the DAC. She made that clear in front of our Board of Health as well. We do take it as well. The contribution of the city was great, and we do thank you for that. There was more of a partnership on the community level. We have Rotary being a big part of it, and they gave a lot of money. The Community Foundation gave a lot of money to that project. The county commissioners, the DAC approved it as well. It's all coming together because we see value in it, and we're going to show that value in the years to come. We didn't have a lot of chance last year when we took possession of it because it was COVID and the vaccine was a priority. But moving forward, we are pivoting well from the COVID time. I think we're going to gain that trust. A lot of it, we were blamed for it locally, but a lot of it was coming from higher up, and we had multiple conversations, me and you, about that. A lot of it was, politics beyond me here. I'm not a politician. I don't play one on TV either. I was there to do the job, to be compliant with what the state, the governor are telling us to do. And I understand those parents, they were dearly, I understood all their concerns. I think we addressed them well at the time, to the best of what we could. And I think moving forward, we have, as a community, to look back and see, okay, how can we improve on that? There's, we sit down every time we have an incident at the health department, whether it's, COVID or something else that's going on, and we do what we call hot wash and go back and say, okay, how we could have done this a little better. That transpired the hiring of a communication specialist, because we never communicated well to the public during that, and that was one of the weak points we identified as a health department. And Cheryl's with me. She's our communication specialist, and she's trying her best to make sure that everybody gets the right information at the right time. So there's a lot of good things that's going to come out of those interactions. I need to appreciate your help back then.
Those are good things.
Miss-
And I'm just
sorry,
going to ask, I just
Mr.
want to ask
Russell.
this last,
I'm sorry, you've had a few questions in a row. Let's let somebody else speak. Mr. Russell.
Kareem, thanks for coming in very much. Do appreciate seeing you here tonight and giving this presentation. I have a couple of friends, one in Youngstown, one in Columbus, who deal with in the public health realm, and they both have said to me on numerous occasions, they bring up our health department and the fact that it is combined. Youngstown person especially wants to know how we did it, because they think he'd like to do that up in Youngstown. But so when you say that you have the reputation is strong, I actually hear that independently, and I really am thankful to the folks who, well before I was on council, had the foresight to work to combine these health departments. And I'm especially thankful as I look at the pandemic and think what an absolute zoo the pandemic would have been if we would have had a city health department and a county health department. It would have been worse than it was now. So I'm thankful for their foresight. On the specifically on the 3-year out clause, I appreciate Mayor having the out clause in case for some odd reason the health department discontinued functioning in the manner they are. But I appreciate the protection that 3 years, the 3-year out gives the city. It's protecting our interests because, as the mayor stated, the thought of standing up a health department from the ground up, you wouldn't do that in a year. You wouldn't do that in 2. 3 years, you'd be sprinting to do it in 3. And so I think that 3-year clause is a protection for the citizens of Findlay and their interests in public health, and to make sure that the delivery continues. And I like the fact that it gives this contract as created gives stability for the district and protects our interests and the interests, obviously, of the county. So just my thoughts on it. But one big thing is thanks for coming in. Appreciate you coming in every year and just kind of giving the summary or your view of it to us and through the magic of the press and our broadcasting to more of the citizens. So thank you.
Councilman Russell, you made my night. Thank you for that. Just for independently, saying this, what I hear every day. I get calls from all little communities just like ours, trying to make things more efficient, more cost efficient for the taxpayers, as well as service efficient. The bottom line is we want to provide premier service. I'm committed to do that. I think all of you are committed to do that, and the mayor and her administration is committed to do that. One thing I want to mention, just working with the future, because I worked for the chief and the chief of fire chief as well, and Mr. Martin. We're starting planning for 2024, the solar eclipse. I think this is important, and see how we are involved as a community, as a public health, from what we're going to see the influx of people coming to watch the totality here in our area. This is all some that we do in the background, and it was the best saying that we always said, if you don't hear from public health, that means things are going well. Hopefully, you don't see me on the front pages of the paper anymore. I come in here more than once a year. I would love to come in here twice a year or once a quarter. But that means we're servicing the people that we were hired to do so.
Just
Mr.
my,
Wobser?
I had one quick question, Grim. So the mobile health clinic, to date, do you believe that it's been utilized to its fullest extent to date?
Not at all. I think we are, again, like I said to Councilwoman Frischi, we're pivoting from COVID a little bit. We did
Yes.
use it to full extent to do the vaccine and the follow-up. There's a lot of value. I'm sure the mayor, back when she asked you to approve that money, explained a little of the value it's adding to our community. We are organizing with the administration, like a screening for all city employees. We did the same for the county. That's gonna be cost saving to your insurance as well. Same with businesses here. It's something appealing, saying, okay, you know what? We have a mobile health clinic, can come to our place and do testing, screenings. This is all adding to the value of life here in Findlay and Hancock County. So
Very good.
appreciate
I
it.
would echo Councilman Russell's compliments. I think we're doing a great job, and it's nice that we know that other people around the state are looking to do the same thing that we have done so well.
Okay, how about one more question, and let's wrap this up. Ms. Frischi?
he shared with us that he is going into other counties, which I think is great. Do we have contracts with them, or is our goal to fully not just do?
This is nothing concrete. Like I said, we're gonna provide the services as it was asked from us, because there's political subdivisions that we cannot cross on our own. I cannot go and take over Wyandotte County. I think what we're gonna see if they will need our help. We'll start contracts, whether they need help in the health inspections done at restaurants, or swimming pool inspections, or sewage and water, whatever. We'll do contracts with. Absolutely, that's how we will organize that.
But right now, it's just a
It's
friendly thing.
that's absolutely. There's nothing concrete right now.
Kareem, I appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thank you so much for having
Obviously,
me.
there were a lot of questions, but it's good to talk to you. I think that every 3 years might be a little long, maybe an annual thing might.
Sure. No,
I
will-
promise not to keep you an hour and a half
No.
or so every
I'll
time.
make like I said, I want to answer all the questions
Yeah,
and
and I think
get everything
There's
cleared up.
nothing wrong with answering all the questions and getting out there, because I'm sure the community has a lot of questions too.
And you all
But
are
again,
welcome
thank
to
you.
contact me. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our oral communications. We will start with reports of municipal officers and departments.
Officer shareholders disclosure form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for Mook, I don't know how you say that, Traders LLC, doing business as Smoke and Stuff, located at 8013 County Road 140, for a C1 and C2 liquor permit. A check of the records show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Slough.
I would move no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor that no objection be filed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. No objection will be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for July 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
City Planning Commission Staff Report for August 11th, 2022, as well as the minutes of July 14th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Report and minutes to be filed.
Findlay Fire Department Activities Report for July 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Police Department Activities Report for July 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Municipal Court Activities Report for July 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
A letter from Service Safety Director Martin regarding the annual Community Park Improvement Program grant. It does require council's verbal confirmation.
I will entertain a motion. I'm not, Mr. Russell,
I'd make a motion that council approve the application for this program grant.
second, Ms. Warnicki. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. We give our verbal approval.
Letter from
I'm sorry, letter to be filed also.
letter from Police Chief Ring regarding Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services body-worn camera grant.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell?
I defer to Denny.
No,
Mr. Hellman?
Thank you. I've just got a quick question on this. I read this, and maybe I've missed it, but I don't know how much is being requested. Can that be answered?
Rob?
Or maybe it's open purposely.
There's no official request for funding at this point. It's just to apply for the actual grant. There's a window of dollars, but we don't actually know what it's going to cost us because we're in the middle of the actual trials at this point. You want to add to that?
Mr. Russell? Oh, go ahead, Chief. I'm sorry.
Make sure we're on here. We haven't determined the dollar amount yet. It's something that we will, once we decide on what vendor we're going with, we'll have to figure that out from there. We're going to go with our highest quote at this point going forward, which we have not gotten that quote yet. It should be here by the end of the week. But it'll be something that we itemize on the grant request, and then the state decides how much you're getting. It's a reimbursement grant, so it has to be funded all up front, and then it's be given from there.
And the intent is then to have body cameras on
All patrol officers, detectives for the department.
Okay, good.
Other questions? Ms. Warnicki?
Did I understand that once we know what the dollar value is and we get the grant, that covers all of it?
No, there's no guarantee that it will cover all of it. We're looking at 3 vendors. It's a 5-year commitment with the contracts you sign with them. The grant funding most likely is only going to cover a portion, and it will only be covering for 2023. It won't be for the entire 5 years.
Okay, I thought that sounded really generous, but I just thought that's
Yeah.
what you said, so I just wanted.
Yep.
Other questions? Mr. Russell?
Chief or Rob, can you kind of, at a high level, summarize the project to date, what kind of things you're
Sure.
encountering, discovering, and a timeline for...
We just finished our second trial yesterday. Our third trial will start the week of Labor Day. We selected 3 vendors to look at, 30-day trials. We had 3 body cams and at least 1 cruiser cam, up to 2 cruiser cams from each vendor. So far, it's been fairly seamless with regards to, we haven't had any kind of real issues with deploying them. Officers are on board with it. Haven't had any complaints from the public. It's gone really well, just trying out the various technologies and trying to make our best what we're looking for. We try to fill all those needs along with the needs of like the prosecutor's offices, the courts, those kind of things. We want something that is reliable yet fairly simple. We don't have a lot of bodies to dedicate to manage the program, so it needs to be something that does its job well and does it with fairly easy.
Mr. Ballman?
I did just want to comment. I rode with Officer Hackworth to the wee hours of Sunday morning,
Yeah.
and I've seen this technology in use, and it is impressive. But I did just please pass along my thanks to Sergeant Griffith,
Yep.
Officer Brish. Did I say that correctly? Brish?
Brickner?
Maybe I'm.
You said you rode with Hackworth?
Yeah, I was passed off. There were 2 different.
They passed him off. They got tired of him. Your turn.
Yeah,
Passed on. Mr. Wobson?
Chief, if we're awarded this grant, does this obligate us to have to start a body
no.
cam program?
I reached out to the rep for our district through OCGS, and we won't know the dollar amount until at the soonest October. Last year it was December of this year.
Okay.
So it's something that once they come out and determine what they're going to give you, then we would have to sit down and discuss it, and then you can either accept or decline.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Russell?
Are you far enough into the into the trials to know if on a per police officer basis, is it making them more or less efficient in the paperwork side of things? Because I recall that was kind of one of the concerns, is that this would make life be a challenge.
It may have slowed some of the report writing down, simply because when you have that footage and things, you want to make sure that what you're getting into your narrative is what was shown. Obviously, human memory sometimes leaves little things out here and there. So it has slowed down a little bit. It hasn't been great though. Those are primarily on major cases.
So then the during this trial, the camera footage that is being taken is in essence usable and
Yes.
part of the record.
Yeah, we hold on to, we can go through and pick out what events we want to hold on to, and we can download those to the city's drive and hold on to them.
Is there a corresponding CALEA changes, or does CALEA then, when these become part of our regular?
No, they're just policy. We had to write policy. We looked at this last year, but to apply for the grant, you had to have policy in place, which we did not have. So we had to work through policy, which was a good 6-8 month procedure to get through with the union and everything, and then got that up to date in the spring of this year, and then that's when the trials began in June. Policy-wise, that's pretty much all for CALEA. They just want you to have it on policy. It doesn't really elevate us at all. It's just another thing that we would be following.
And then is there an expectation as to when we think we would be fully implemented?
Obviously, the goal would be as soon as we could in 2023, but given supply chain and things like that, we don't have it depends on our vendor. We've been told by one vendor it was anywhere from 6 weeks from order on up to potentially 6 months. It's just a matter of what things are like come 2023.
Okay, Mr. Russell?
And then Mayor Rob, do you are we incorporating this into budget for 2023-24?
You are reading my mind. So first of all, thank you, Chief, for going over the details. I want to be very clear. And one of the reasons that we're bringing this to you is obviously we weren't exactly planning to be requesting grants at this point. We were really planning to kind of bring the proposal to you, have the overall budget amount, then determine what grants are available, kind of get your support, find grants, and then put it in the budget. Because of the expedited timeline for these grants that they're rolling out, we don't want to miss the window to apply if we are interested in it. And so that is why we specifically asked them, hey, if we get this and we decide not to move forward, is there any penalty? Is that an issue? And they said, no, we understand. You know, they're working with expedited process with communities across the state. So it would be our expectation that as we understand the full financial impacts, that we would have that discussion with you all probably before the budget process. And then we would be able to incorporate that into the budget moving forward. Rob? This is a whole team effort, clearly.
Clown car. We're doing great. But to answer your specific question, our long-term capital plan, there is a placeholder in 23 for this.
Hearing no other questions, thank you. Chief, keep up the good work.
Income Tax Board minutes for May 4th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding additional funds for water parts inventory, ordinance number 2022-62, resolution to transfer funds.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding sewer funds for water parts inventory, ordinance 2022-62.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from Police Chief Ring regarding charitable trust donation.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Safety Director Martin regarding purchase of 2 replacement fire department utility pickup trucks.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Martin. So we were going to get 2 Ford pickup trucks, but Ford's not making trucks very fast. so we couldn't get them. But we found out that if we sign a waiver, we can get a suitable truck for even less money than the Ford trucks were. Am I reading your letter correct?
Yes, sir.
So why would I not have done that in the first place?
Well, Ford is the, seems loud, Ford is the state contracted vendor, and so we work through them. And then, since they don't have anything available, we're looking to go with another vehicle.
Right.
Brand. So, and it's actually cheaper. So we have an opportunity here, and we just want to bypass the bid process and go after that.
No, don't get me wrong, I'm 100% in favor of the waiver. My question is, why didn't we have the waiver in the first place? So I can get a suitable truck for less money, and we're still getting a discount from the state. Why wouldn't we not have done this in the first place?
And that was a discussion that we actually had today, because we typically use the vehicle that the state puts out for us to use through the contracting bidding process. And we're like, we're looking at these other options because Ford is not able to provide what the demand is. So we're looking at moving forward and looking at these alternative options in the future.
So that was going to be my next question.
Yes.
So in the future, we'll evaluate
If the opportunities are there.
all options.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes, sir.
Are we obligated to go through that state process there, or can we say, no, we're gonna look for a better deal without any kind of obligation through that state process?
That's correct.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed?
City Auditor Stashak regarding the salary ordinance via ordinance 22-084.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed?
Summary financial reports for July 31st, 2022.
Questions or comments? Reports to be filed? Committee reports.
The Strategic Planning Committee met on August 2nd, 2022 for a Zoom call with Planning Next to review final draft of public comments and final action plan. We recommend to continue to move forward with the strategic planning process.
Mr. Wobser?
Make a motion to accept the committee report.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It is accepted.
The Water and Sewer Committee met on August 3rd, 2022 to discuss transmitter project. We recommend to move forward with the project on an expedited schedule as proposed.
Mr. Greeno?
Move for exception. How about adoption of Water and Sewer Committee report?
Second, Mr. Russell. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approval of the committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It is approved.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request from Michael Stoner to vacate a portion of the east-west alley from the South Blanchard Street to Graceland Avenue, bounded between lots 5391 and 5392 in the Leisure Addition. We recommend tabling the request.
Mr. Hellman?
I move to accept the committee report.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Ms. Frischie?
I am newly on that committee, and I apologize for missing the committee meeting that night. I didn't think an alley vacation was going to be a big deal. I saw all the minutes or all the notes from the committee report. That night I went out and I visited with the property owner, got a better feel for things. I think a couple other people on the committee did the same thing. I think this is a reasonable request, and to the point that I actually took the time over the weekend and I visited with every property owner that did not sign the petition to get their input. And even one of the property owners that was against it is now okay and in favor of doing that vacation. So I'm hoping this goes back to committee and we can get this done and taken care of.
Other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The committee report is adopted. Legislation, we have one resolution.
First reading for Resolution 22-2022, a resolution transferring funds within appropriated funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell?
I believe this is just a simple bookkeeping, move it from one fund to the other. Therefore, I move that council statutory rules be suspended in Resolution 22-2022. Yeah. Be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspending the rules say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Sorry, Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? And Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the resolution its second and third reading.
Resolution 22-2022, Resolution 22-2022.
Mr. Russell?
Move to adopt the resolution.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of Resolution 22-2022, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-68, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough?
Move for adoption of ordinance 2022-068.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-69, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno?
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-069.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Oh, I got way out of order. Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-74, an ordinance amending Chapter 1100 et sec of the codified ordinances of the City of Findlay, Ohio, known as the zoning code by rezoning the following described property referred to as 909 Broad Avenue rezone, which previously was zoned R3 small lot residential to C1 local commercial.
Mr. Hellman?
I move for approval of ordinance 2022-074.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-76, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-77, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell?
So that the concession stand out at the Cube can continue to sell product, I would move that council statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its third reading.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of suspension of the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-77.
Second, Mr. Wopser?
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wopser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-78, An ordinance amending ordinance number 2021-107 to authorize the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to continue combined health and environmental services provided by the Hancock County General Health District and the City of Findlay Health Department and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobser.
Mayor, I believe you had requested this back when this came on our table, that you'd like to get this wrapped up. Is that correct, or am I misreading or mismemorizing my notes?
That would be preferred. However, I'm fine with it going to a third reading.
In that case, I will withdraw my motion.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-80, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
So that our streets folks can continue to do their great work and finish out the season strong, they need funds, and I haven't heard, this is a pretty easy request. Therefore, I'd move that council statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its third reading.
Second, Ms. Frishy. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Aye. Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
And Mr. Russell?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-80.
Ms. Frishy.
Motion for approval.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki? Aye. Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
And Mr. Slough?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-81. An ordinance establishing job classifications, pay ranges, salary schedules, and other matters that may affect pay for all non-elected officers and employees of the City of Findlay, Ohio, and repealing ordinance number 2021-116, ordinance 2022-11, and all other ordinances and/or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-82, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director of the City of Findlay, Ohio, to apply for body-worn cameras to be purchased through the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services Grant Program, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Given the timelines involved, I'd move that council statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
And Ms. Warnicki?
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-82, ordinance 2022-82.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-082.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-83, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Move that, similar to the resolution that we suspended, this is a similar ordinance. Move that council statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno, or Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Sorry.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-83, ordinance 2022-83.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-083.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-84, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Frishy?
Make a motion to suspend the rules and give ordinance 84 its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-84, ordinance 2022-84.
Ms. Frishy?
Move for approval.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion. Mr. Russell?
This is the same estate that a month or so ago had funds that the fire department used for equipment purchases, and I just thank Mr. Hamilton in this estate for the support of our fire and our police department. I appreciate the fact that we are able to get a lot of things that I don't think we would ordinarily be looking at, and it's very much appreciated.
No other questions? All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-85, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director of the City of Findlay, Ohio to waive formal advertising and bidding requirements and enter into a contract or contracts for the purchase of 2 fire department utility pickup trucks and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Palmer?
Due to the great pricing we're getting with this, I move that council's statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wobser.
Nay.
The rules of council have been suspended.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-85, ordinance 2022-85.
Mr. Baumann?
Move for adoption.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Discussion. Mr. Stashak?
I have a quick request so that this complies with what I need to be able to pay the bill properly and pass audit. The legislation really should specify, since we are waiving bidding requirements, who we're buying the trucks from. So if you could make an amendment or a motion to amend the legislation to state where we're buying them, I would sure appreciate it.
Mr. Russell?
Rob, it's Warner. Move to amend the ordinance.
I think in the letter specified he only had one.
There was an email update that Jeremy Kelb, city engineer, put out that since the letter was put forth to you for the packet, there was a change. Warner had 2 at the time that I requested the legislation. Since then, they only have 1. So, but since the city is already another department worked with Warner to purchase a truck, that's what I was requesting the waiving of the formal bid process, because we are going to buy the second vehicle. That's what this legislation's about. The second vehicle, Trying to read you over there, sorry. The second vehicle, in the meantime, since Warner didn't have the second vehicle, we were able to find a dealership in Ohio that actually was able to accommodate the same request. And so that money was already appropriated, so we're working that through the process. But we've never purchased a vehicle with them. It's under the $50,000 process, so we're okay with that. One truck. There's a vehicle being purchased by Warner.
So is this one over 50,000?
No, neither. The Warner,
So we've already purchased one vehicle from Warner. So with the previous vehicle from a sewer department, it was sewer department that purchased one back in February or something like that, March, let's say. And then since this new vehicle will be coming in, or that we're purchasing from that, that's going to put them over the 50,000. So because those two vehicles combined is over the 50,000, that's why we got to wait for the one from Warner.
Okay. So we're still short a truck in my count.
No, because Coughlin, I believe Coughlin, we were able to secure another one from Coughlin, which we still have a 50,000, I guess, threshold with them, you can say. So we'll have our two vehicles. Originally, they were both from Warner, but since they've sold one, we were able to secure a second one. So we have the two, but we still need to waive the bidding process for Warner because they're over the 50,000 mark.
Okay, so do we need to, I'm sorry, Grant, do we need to amend the amount also? Since we're down, or was there not an amount in there?
We had two, so probably to make sure everything is correct.
So it's one truck.
One truck from Warner will still need to waive the bidding process from Warner.
Okay. So the amendment then should take into account that it is one truck, not two, and that it is being purchased through Warner.
That is correct.
Jim, does that get you where you need to go? All right.
Yeah, so we'll need a motion to amend. Mr. Palmer?
Motion to amend that we're purchasing the vehicle from Warner.
Second, Mr. Russell. Any further discussion? Mr. Russell?
Not a second. It's a question to Jeremy, and that we're purchasing one vehicle. Is that part of your motion? Because the current
Purchasing one vehicle from Warner
Thank you.
Automotive, yes.
I'll second that.
Second,
Brilliantly
Mr. Russell.
stated motion.
Discussion?
Mr. Russell, my name's Josh.
I'm not the only one.
I'm sorry, any questions or comments based on the amendment? Ms. Frishy?
So just to clarify, you're getting two vehicles, but the one is under 50,000, so you don't need permission from council, so you don't need to have that included in this amendment.
Yeah, correct. They're both of the vehicles are under 50,000, so they're both 45,000 each, roughly, and some change. But since Coughlin, we have not bought a vehicle from them, they're still within their $50,000 threshold. So that's why we don't have to waive the bidding process for them. But Warner has already had a purchase from them, so if you combine the two 45s together, it puts them over the 50.
Mr. Stashak, does that satisfy your?
I think Jeremy did a good job, but so that you folks know, as part of our day-to-day, what we have to do is we have to monitor the aggregate that is spent at each vendor. Once the aggregate passes or bangs up against 50,000, then we need legislation waiving bidding when it's a situation like this. So that's for everything, whether it be a truck or equipment, or a lot of times you'll see other things. And I hope that helps those following along at home.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to amend. All those in favor say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
And Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
The motion to amend is approved. I will now entertain a motion to approve the ordinance as amended. Mr. Palmer?
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-085 as amended.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Yes, aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Oh, Mr. Russell?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted. Oh, can I go like that? All right, old business. Any old business? Any new business? Oh, darn. Mr. Wobser.
And it's that our favorite time of the year again. And by request of the auditor, we need to have a committee of the whole meeting for our mid-year review and our pre-budget meeting. And the auditor, unless he's changed his mind, has requested that we do this on September 27th at 5:30 p.m. It would take approximately 1 hour, and we would do that here in council chambers. That would be September 27th at 5:30 p.m.
Okay, I will need a second to that motion. Mr. Palmer, and any discussion?
Ms. Mayor, did you have a comment on this?
I was just going to ask if there was any way to move it earlier in the day. Maybe 4:30 would work well, just not to be difficult, but I've already committed to Habitat to volunteer, so you guys can come help me build a house that night afterwards if you want.
I'd have to check with my staff.
Okay.
Could look at a time I wasn't aware that that was being requested, and I would like to.
Very good. So let's do this. We'll keep it at 5:30 at this point. Jim, you'll check with your staff, and if we can amend that date, we've got plenty of time to let everybody know.
All
Thank
those
you.
in favor of the committee of the whole meeting, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay. Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Okay. Any other new business? Mr. Greeno.
Yes, I'd like to schedule a water and sewer meeting for August the 23rd at 4 o'clock, third floor conference room, and we'll be discussing the CSO long-term control plan.
Other new business? Mr. Palmer?
Yes, I want to call a committee meeting for streets, sidewalks, and parking for Monday, August 22nd at 4 o'clock in council's office.
Ms. Frishy, you're aware you're on that committee? If you're
Yeah, no, he talked to me. We're
Okay,
good.
fine. I
good.
just that was one of my things. I wanted to make sure you knew
Where I'm supposed to be.
which
Yep.
ones you're.
Agenda item is going to be carriage walks.
What time is it?
4 o'clock.
Other new business? Hearing none, Sorry. I didn't hear any until all of a sudden. Ms. Frishy, I'm sorry, you raised your hand first.
I was just seeing if Grant was calling a planning and zoning meeting, because I'd really like to readdress the tabled legislation, since everybody else is scheduling meetings.
No.
You're not going to schedule, and isn't there another item also in our packet for planning and zoning?
That's up to the chairman.
For,
We have them regularly scheduled on the second Thursday at noon.
good to know that,
Okay,
that's learned.
any other new business? Ms. Mayor?
We'd just like to request an executive session. I know it's been a long meeting, but as my email requested, I'll try to keep it brief.
Okay. Other new business? Hearing none. Mr. Russell?
Move that we adjourn into executive session to discuss a property acquisition. Upon exiting executive session, no other business would be conducted, and we will simply adjourn this meeting.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of adjourning into executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. We are adjourned into executive session. During executive session, all the rest of you may exit, and we will not come back with any additional business after we're done.